Perfect. Hello, thanks so much for joining us today. So my name is Cassidy Silbernagel. I'm from Exergy Solutions. I'm also joined here with Joseph Flynn from Altair. We're going to tag team this, so I'll pass it on to him in a few minutes. So first, I'd like to give you just a little bit of background on Exergy Solutions, and this is important just because of the overall story that I'm trying to tell here. So Exergy has been around since 2012, and it's a Canadian engineering firm that's focused on solving complex challenges while delivering results with speed, precision, and safety. So we meet our clients where they're at on the technology readiness level scale, and we help them move it forward just a little bit. I'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit later. So Exergy provides a fit-for-purpose solution tailored for our clients' unique needs. So our services span advisory, engineering, and manufacturing. Our approach is more than just a typical engineering firm. We actually collaborate and we problem solve with our partners, with our clients. So we combine agile manufacturing, methodologies with cutting-edge tools like additive manufacturing. And this allows us to streamline the process and accelerate timelines without compromising on quality or safety. So from concept to deployment, our team delivers value every step of the way. So we're located in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. There we have a 17,000 square foot facility where we integrate design, fabrication, and testing all under one roof. So from reverse engineering hard to find parts to developing pilot scale equipment, we help our clients quickly innovate and efficiently by having our designers and our builders working together in the same location. So that technology readiness scale that I was talking about earlier, it was originally developed by NASA in the 1970s to describe how close a technology was to being flight ready. So it was later revamped and became quite global in the 1990s, and now it's used as a measure of the maturity level of a particular technology. Right in the middle is what's called the Valley of Death. So this is a very high-risk phase between TRLs level 3 and 7, where technologies transition from a simple academic proof of concept to something that is ready to be adopted by industry. So this stage faces funding shortages. It is highly technically uncertain. You have zero income. You have a lack of market validation. And so this makes it very difficult for innovators to progress along this. And this is where Exergy comes in. So we meet our clients anywhere along this spectrum from TRL 0, where it's just a simple idea in their head, all the way to 7, where it's ready to be mass produced. And so this is done with that agile development cycle, which really focuses on failing fast, learning from it, and then developing the next version as quickly as possible. So one of the key technologies that we see a great potential in the oil and gas industry in particular, is additive heat exchangers. So our first attempt was just a simple standard counterflow heat exchanger. So the goal of this was to use a gyroid lattice structure to quickly get to the TRL level 3, because there's been plenty of extensive research on the earlier phases. So you've probably walked past several dozen of them on the way here, these heat exchangers that are sitting on the tables. And those are really great concepts to kind of prove the point. But we wanted to take it just a little bit further and actually test it to get some real data and push it to a TRL level 4. So the resulting design reduced the overall envelope. It improved the fluid flow with new port locations. It was manufactured in a single piece, which helps eliminate some of the risks of failed brazed welds and increases reliability. It increased the cooling and heating capacity by about 58%, but it does perform slightly poorer at some of the higher flow rates, and this is due to the gyroid's high pressure drop. So after this, what did we actually prove? I picked some random parameters, I picked some random gyroid sizes, threw it all together, and now we have some lab data. And now it's at TRL level 4, but it's still just a pretty object that sits on a table rather than doing something useful in the real world. And speaking of pretty objects on tables, it's actually at the Altair booth. You can come see it later. But how do we take this and push it beyond the TRL level 4? So after creating that physical metal proof of concept, we began presenting the idea to some existing and potential clients. And some showed some strong interest, but they wanted a solution that has reached at least a level 7 so that they could deploy in a field trial. They also raised 4 key questions that we had to address. The first was, can we develop a straightforward workflow to design a heat exchanger that meets specific requirements, like a specific heat capacity or a specific pressure drop? Then they asked, is this adaptable? If we have one little change that we need to make, do we have to start from scratch? The next is, can it handle the pressures that we're actually asking you to handle? And can we validate that performance before we actually get it printed? Because printing is really expensive. And then how can we get it certified? We have our local regulatory body in Alberta. It's the Alberta Boiler Safety Association, or ABSA. So how do we get it to them, and how do we get them to accept it? And so we actually tried to tackle all these questions simultaneously. So we gathered some client requirements. We worked with Altair to streamline that workflow. We enabled some, and that workflow actually enabled us to make some very easy tweaks to the design, so we didn't have to start from scratch. And we also started collaborating with our local safety authority, ABSA, because we had to actually familiarize them with what the heck laser powder bed fusion is. They're very familiar with traditional welding, but like micro laser powder welding, not on their radar. So I'm actually quite pleased to report that we've had significant progress on all of these fronts. So nothing actually matures a proof of concept faster than actually applying some real world specifications to that idea. So for us, in this exercise, it actually quite opened our eyes to what industry was asking from these heat exchangers. So first, the max pressures were quite a lot higher than what we were anticipating, but these are actually the worst case scenario situations that it has to handle. It's actually twice as much as what the nominal operating conditions are. It also had to be easily installed by a 2 or 3 person team in order to avoid the need of any additional equipment or cranes to come in to assemble it. The high flow rates meant that the lattices actually needed to accommodate this high flow rate without causing additional pressure drops or hinder performance. And due to the layout of the skid that this was going to go into, and some other constraints that couldn't be changed, the inlet and the outlet had to be installed on the exact same side of the device, which is quite different from our original design. So it also needed to be made from an alloy which prevents fouling. So that's just a simple chemical reaction between the metal that it's made out of and some of the chemicals that are in the gas stream. And these last ones are all quite important, and they're all kind of intermingled and interdependent. So if we can reduce the number of heat exchangers and the overall design, then we're allowed a little bit more flexibility on some of these other requirements. So to give you a sense of the cost of replacing one of these traditional ones, it's around 6,500 euros for a single heat exchanger, and in their design they have 5. So if we can reduce the number of high pressure ones from 2 to 1 and the low pressure ones from 3 to 2, it actually gives us a bit more flexibility. So if the cost to print a heat exchanger is twice as much, but the performance is also twice as good, then that's a huge win, because as you can see in the image, there's a lot of additional piping and structure and equipment that goes into processing this gas. And so we need to really focus on improving that. So we started the design in traditional CAD software. along with the volume that the lattice needed to use, and then Inspire handled the rest. So the requirements to have this inlet and outlet on the same side required a bit of a change. So rather than just having it filled with a lattice, the flow would actually just bypass most of that fluid flow. And so we introduced a baffle system to help push that a little bit further into the lattice volume. And you can think of it as a elongated U or two like chain link fences that are kind of handled over top of each other. So it creates a really complicated structure. And we also used a Schwartz D diamond lattice over the gyroid because that's been proven in literature to have a much better pressure drop. So why did we even use Altair? So it actually started years ago when we were shopping around for a specific project that required a really fine lattice generation. And for that, at the time, we went with a company called Gen 3D and Sulis, and it was a really easy decision based on the value it provided for the cost. And then when they were later acquired by Altair, again, it was an easy choice to go with them because of the additional computational tools that came with the suite that was there. And so the functionality that was in Sulis got moved into Inspire, and what Inspire does is it allows us to use implicit modeling to do things that we just couldn't do in traditional CAD, like having a very defined fillet between the lattice structure and our shell. Because if we're dealing with such high pressures, we don't want to have any sharp transitions which can cause a stress riser. And so we were able to work with Altair to refine this workflow where we import the native CAD without having to save it as some other file format, and then configure the lattices very quickly with the generative, with the implicit modeling. And then we're able to move into simulation with both FEA and CFD. And so I'm going to pass it on to Joe now to talk more about that simulation side and what Altair has to offer. Here's Joe.
Thanks, Cassidy. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the workflow and the tool set that Altair Inspire provides customers like Exergy. And we're really looking to go end to end with as much of the design to simulation as possible. So for anyone who isn't familiar with the Altair Inspire product, it comprises these things. So geometry creation and rendering, designer-friendly computational physics, effectively to enable designers to make better informed decisions involving simulation. We have generative design, so not all of the geometry has to be created by sketches and manual operations. We have a lot of data-driven and simulation-driven geometry creation. And then finally, manufacturing simulation. And what this really means is within one tool, we can progress from your first sketch or your first imported model from your CAD software of choice right the way through simulation and verification up to simulating the manufacture of the process, ultimately trying to build confidence that your component will work and will be manufacturable at the scale you require. Altair Inspire is right at home, working with all of the major geometry representations. You can work within one of these, and you can definitely work between them. It's very straightforward to have all of these within the same model, and that goes for geometry creation and also simulation. So a recent addition is implicit modeling, and that came through the acquisition of my previous company, Gen 3D. And from a modeling perspective, it really enables us to produce models like the ones you see on the screen. So we're right at home creating lattice structures for a whole host of applications, be it promoting tissue ingrowth in biomedical applications, through to purely structural load cases with weight savings. And we're also able to do that in quite complicated ways. So be it conforming the lattice to freeform surfaces, we have no problem with that, or also using other sources of volumetric data, simulation data, sensor data, possibly even imaging data, to locally control things like this lattice structure in the bottom right that you see here. So using data to locally edit the shape of the component. We call this field-driven design, and it goes right through the product. There are many, many things that you can drive this way. So I mentioned we're interested in building complete workflows for our customers and making that as straightforward as possible. I'm actually going to show you two workflows that have been under development, one perhaps more traditional, and one that shows a new way of thinking and possibly where we're going in the future. So really it's about solving the conjugate heat transfer physics inside the heat exchanger. And in this more traditional version of the workflow, we start with meshing. So for this particular design that Cassidy has provided, we're looking at 3.18 million nodes and 17.6 million elements to capture that physics appropriately. From there, we're able to reach convergence on our simulations, and then in the post-processing stage, the results presentation, we can see everything, including color plots of the fluid temperature for both fluid channels, the one that enters hot and the one that enters cold. And we can also see temperature streamlines and velocity profiles on cut planes. So all of your standard post-processing there. Now, the CFD actually informs the subsequent structural analysis. And we're fortunate at Altair, and particularly with Inspire, we have access to two structural solvers, one more traditional finite element analysis, and one meshless solver through the SimSolid technology, which is directly embedded in Inspire. So we're looking at this worst case burst pressure, and what we can see is the pressures applied to collections of surfaces depending on what's going on, and then clamp conditions at the inlets and the outlets of that model. What's really critical here is we're able to apply boundary conditions to different geometry types. So be it a traditional CAD surface with features or actually a mesh, we can extract features from meshes and have a very intuitive selection about where you're applying, in this case, pressures, but also other things. And ultimately, after achieving convergence, we're able to show the deformed shape and also the factor of safety analysis with color plots. So I'm now going to show you an alternative workflow with some of the more recently introduced technology, and this is using the Inspire Fluid Solver. This is also embedded, so this is a GPU-accelerated voxel-based fluid solver directly in the product, and it's able to accept implicit geometry, like the lattice you see here. And yeah, it's really good for identifying those trends that you might see by changing different design parameters, like the sizing of the lattice. We can couple that up with the fact we can easily parameterize the implicit geometry, change the aspect ratio of the lattice unit cells, apply boundary conditions once, and then run a design of experiments or a goal-seeking optimization using those parameters as variables to find the best configuration for the core inside the heat exchanger. Ultimately, we can then plot the trends and see which is the best way to go. And whilst we've shown the beginnings of what this can look like, I think we have the scope to go much, much further with this. We're really excited about this workflow. And the key points are that there's no need to remesh because it's a voxel-based fluid solver. You apply your boundary conditions once. There's no meshing stage. So we're getting through about 4 simulations an hour on this concept here. So it's very, very fast. So if you want to come and learn more about this, please come and visit us on the booth. If you're going to photograph one slide or remember one set of things about Altair Inspire, I would say this is the one, right? So very quickly, we're creating end-to-end workflows, sketch to manufacturing simulation. We never cut the digital thread of data. Every design decision, every simulation result, all captured there in a traceable way. We have lots of in-product simulation, extreme levels of control through field-driven design on the shape, and something that's perhaps less obvious, a very, very deep Python API. So you can automate and customize the product to suit your workflows. So I'm going to hand back to Cassidy now to wrap the presentation up. Thank you very much.
So now that we have all this data, what are we going to do? So with these simulations in hand, we can now go to our safety regulatory body. If we had one more slide, or the previous slide. Here we go. and give them some of these results for the pressure burst so we can have them certify it. So we've been working with them already for the past several months to get them up to speed with what laser powder bed is, as well as the standards that are already out there for this technology that they can rely on for both the manufacturing and material properties from AM. So huge thank you to any of you who are helping develop these metal AM standards, especially for applications like these or ones in the oil and gas industry. They're really helping push the industry forward. And now with the FEA done, we now can get an understanding from that certification body. We can progress it from TRL 4 to 5 and 6 and show a plan on how we're going to get to 7. And so now we can go back and prove that this isn't just stuck as some academic idea and it's not in the valley of death any longer, but we're actually going to help this move towards where these ideas are widely adopted by industry so that they can become more efficient, which will help them reduce their emissions and help us towards a more net zero world. So with that, thank you so much for attending our presentation today. We'll be able to answer any questions that you have at the Altair booth, which is literally just several aisles down that way, and we'll be there for the rest of the day. Thank you so much.